Lewis Hamilton became the 6th race winner of 2024 with a second race win in 2 weeks for Mercedes and his first since 2021. But it was an absolute thriller at Silverstone, with 3 different teams being the fastest on track at different phases of the race in changeable conditions. There was a lot to talk about, so here's my 5 things we learned from the British Grand Prix. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. Mercedes show unbelievable pace. At the home Grand Prix of both drivers, it was Mercedes that managed to deliver 1-2 on the grid for the British Grand Prix. This achievement is pretty impressive considering just how far behind the Mercedes team were at the beginning of the season. The progress made by the team to be at the front for 4 races in a row has been significant, and after George Russell took the win in Austria with a lot of luck, the team delivered this weekend and were legitimately the fastest team. Through qualifying, the team perhaps gained an advantage over Verstappen, with the Dutchman suffering from floor damage to his Red Bull. Had he had the full floor, you never know whether Verstappen would have been able to deliver an excellent lap just as he did last weekend in Austria. But it seemed like Mercedes was the fastest team on Saturday, and they reinforced that with Hamilton on Sunday. The team started off well in the race and held on to the top 2 positions. And as the race developed with patches of rain, it would always be the team with the fastest car and the best strategy that would make the difference, and the experience of Lewis Hamilton prevailed as he took his 104th race victory and his 9th at his home Grand Prix. The race itself was a masterclass from Mercedes. They were the fastest team in what was an incredibly close battle at the front, but they also made the right call to go onto the inters and then the right time to get back onto the dry tyres as they adjusted the car well to manage the soft tyre in the final stint. It felt like it could be touch and go towards the end of the race in terms of tyre management, but it's moments like that where Hamilton made the difference. It must be said that George Russell was also doing very well this weekend when his race ended early as a result of a water pressure issue. This was a real shame for the driver, and I believe he could have been in the mix for another podium finish without this reliability problem. On the whole, I think we've now seen enough evidence over the last 4 races to confirm that Mercedes are really back. They've done an amazing job to make so much progress in 2024, and they are now back in the mix each and every weekend. So for me, it's a green box for Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton. They've made amazing progress, and if it wasn't for Russell's retirement, they could well have had a purple box for their result this weekend. McLaren find some great pace in changeable conditions, but cost themselves at the same time. It was a difficult start to the race for McLaren after qualifying 3rd and 5th. The team didn't quite have enough pace to get onto the front row on Saturday and found themselves behind the Mercedes cars. Norris then lost a position on the opening lap to Verstappen after the Red Bull driver managed to find some clear space and carry more speed, while Norris was almost blocked by the Mercedes drivers as they all jostled for position. But the race came alive around lap 15 as the rain began to fall over the Silverstone circuit, and it seemed like the McLaren team had a setup that could carry more pace in the tricky conditions, where some corners were damp and others were dry. The commentators were saying that they thought that they were running slightly softer suspension than Mercedes, which allowed them to manage the pace where the track was not quite wet enough to require a change of tyre. Through that phase of the race, the McLarens looked brilliant. They were the fastest cars on track by a long way and were building up a strong lead ahead. But as the second rain phase came, the team made the mistake of not double stacking their drivers in efforts to avoid the 2 to 3 second time loss for Piastri, and instead cost their Australian driver more than 20 seconds by keeping him out on the wrong tyres. This is a call that's down to both the driver and the team, as they need to make the right decision together. But it's perhaps a sign of Piastri's inexperience of racing in these challenging changeable conditions, where it's crucial to be on the right tyre at the right time. The whole situation was reminding me of the race that Lando lost in Russia in 2021, where he was on the wrong tyre towards the end of the race and lost himself a race win as a result. I'm sure the learnings he took from that race weekend may have helped him today to make the right call at this point in time. From there, the team led the race with Norris, while Piastri dropped back to 6th, behind the other front-running drivers. But they would at least have one more opportunity to get on the right tyres at the end to take them to the end of the Grand Prix. McLaren had a new medium tyre available to both drivers, something that Mercedes wouldn't have available. But they made another error. Norris came in a lap later than Verstappen and Hamilton, and then he missed his marks in the pit stop, which caused a bit of chaos and lost time. Not only this, but the team went on to the soft tyre, something that Norris couldn't manage to the same extent as Lewis Hamilton, and it felt short-sighted when you consider how much more pace Oscar Piastri had at the end, as he did opt for that medium tyre. So the team did end the British Grand Prix as the highest scoring constructor, but I'm sure the team and drivers will be kicking themselves today after they cost themselves this race. It's difficult to know if they would have actually won the race without the strategic blunders, but they certainly would have been much closer to the win in the end. So for me, it's an amber or perhaps a papaya box for McLaren, as the team made their own mistakes this weekend, and both the drivers and the strategists are responsible for these errors. Red Bull are off the pace, but Max bails them out again. There's no doubt that if this race had come at the beginning of the season, it would have been a strong win for Max Verstappen and Red Bull, the team with a dominant car at the beginning of this year, and at a more traditional circuit like Silverstone, there's no doubt that the team would have been dominant. But perhaps this weekend is a sign of how far Red Bull have fallen, as Verstappen was driving what was the third fastest car this weekend. The driver made an error in qualifying, ending up over the gravel and damaging his floor in the process. But despite that, he managed to get to 4th position on the grid and would be in with a chance of getting in the mix with the drivers ahead of him in the race. Early on, Verstappen looked good and was confidently making progress on the first lap to get himself into the top 3. But as the stint progressed, he seemed to be unable to keep up the pace and was soon overtaken by the McLaren drivers as they had a strong phase in the initial rain. This was a sign of just how far Red Bull had fallen in 2024. They are not the outright fastest team anymore, and while they are still capable of delivering plenty of race wins, it's unclear where they will land in the pecking order at each race weekend. What is a constant though is the fact that Max Verstappen is always able to deliver for that team, dragging his car up the order. For 6 races in a row now, Perez has failed to finish in the top 6. He hasn't had a podium since the 5th race of the season in China, and he seems lost in his car right now. This weekend, Perez crashed out in qualifying and then had a race where he tried to do something different, only to leave him further and further down the order. It was massively disappointing to see, and the team must be questioning whether they should have extended his contract at all. Red Bull are starting to drop down the order at each race weekend. And while they're still the favourites for the Drivers' Championship with Max, they will surely be looking over their shoulder in the Constructors' Championship. The one thing that they'll be pleased to see is the fact that it isn't just a single team competing. McLaren and Mercedes will be taking points away from each other, and potentially Ferrari could do the same at certain circuits. On the whole, it was Max who did what he does best to take a strong second position, and had there been a few more laps to this race, I feel Verstappen could have taken the win. But Red Bull seem to be slowly imploding from within, with many elements not going their way, from their car development to their second driver. On the whole, it has to be an amber box for Red Bull, as there's only so long that they can expect to remain as the top team in the sport when they're fighting with just one car. Aston Martin secured double points. It's been a challenging season for Aston Martin. They haven't had the pace out of the gate like they did in 2023, and they've even more recently found it difficult to get into the top 10 at all. But the team delivered at the race that is over the road from their factory in Silverstone, as they finished 7th and 8th, with Lance Stroll being the lead driver for Aston Martin. It was a brilliant result for the team with 10 points, and while it feels like their 5th position in the Constructors' Championship isn't really at risk, they will be buoyed by the excellent results and see it as strong progress. The team are in a difficult position right now and are in a transition phase after a few years of growth under the new ownership. But this weekend showed more positive signs that they may well improve in the years to come. More rumours of Adrian Newey going to the Aston Martin team emerged this weekend, and adding Newey to their already strong team could create a technical setup that's incredibly strong in the years to come. Adding these potential technical team signings to the fact that they've secured Alonso services in the long run could well mean that they become a force to be reckoned with in 2026 as they start their new engine partnership with Honda as well. There are lots of positives for Aston Martin this weekend, as they ended up with a strong result in tough conditions, so it's a green box for the team. Williams deliver at their home Grand Prix. It was an interesting weekend as the order seemed to be shaken up once again. Mercedes were the fastest team and Aston Martin were back in the top 10, but also Williams found a way to get themselves into the top 10 as Alex Albon secured points for the team for only the second time this season. Not only this, but even Logan Sargent managed to find his way into the mix with an 11th place finish. This was a strong weekend for that team, and while many teams and drivers faltered in the challenging conditions. What is positive is the fact that the Williams team's pace was consistent across both Saturday and Sunday, as Albon actually finished where he started despite a challenging opening lap where he dropped a few positions. The team knew that this race would be tricky with the rain, and they made sure to be in the right place at the right time for a solid result, so it's a green box for the Williams team. So it was a race that left me with more questions. The pecking order is changing from race to race, and we've now had 6 winners this season from 4 different teams. It's an absolutely brilliant season, and exactly what we've wanted to see for so many years. And if you want to see why I believe Red Bull should be worried, watch this video next.